VikesNow, the Wednesday edition. I'm here with my regular weekly guest, the editor of PurplePTSD.com, Josh Frey. How goes it?
I'm doing good, my man. I actually tested positive for COVID earlier this week, so we're grinding right now, but we're getting through it. So I
Oh,
apologize if my voice sounds a little gross, but
really?
but we'll hopefully bounce back a little bit next weekend. So
All right. Well, for the viewers, Josh and I, as you might be able to tell, are close coworkers, and this was my first inkling learning about his COVID diagnosis. Is this your first or second time getting it?
this is my second time in the past 3.5 months.
Oh, so you're
So
like Kirk.
I'm a veteran at this point.
Yeah, you are the Kirk Cousins of the UFTA Sports Network, founded by Joe
Yeah.
Johnson. Yeah, Cousins. I think Cousins actually had it twice, but when he got it the last time, somebody tried to say he had it 3 times within a year, and I was like, no, he didn't have it 3 times. But that's neither here nor there. But we got a segue. We're talking about Kirk Cousins right away, and I'll give a disclaimer to our viewers that this topic could be moot by the time you eat dinner tonight. However, on KFan, the flagship of Vikings football, they were hinting, whispering, needling, nudging at the fact that Kirk Cousins may be more hurt than folks knew up until today. Why? Because he was demolished over and over against the Jets. Subsequently, the point spread against the Lions this week is 2.5 points in favor of the Lions at their house. It seemed very weird when it kind of came out and climbed a little bit. But I'm going to ask you first, at the risk of being yesterday's news by the time this really starts to hit the masses. Do you think that there is a possibility that Mr. Kirk Daniel Cousins is questionable or out for Week 14?
I mean, it would certainly make sense considering some of the hits that he took this past weekend and some of the hits that he was dealing out as well. That scramble where he just trucked CJ Mosley into the ground on that first down. That was an incredible run. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't blame him at all if he was feeling a little bit from some of these hits that he took against the Jets because they were pounding him over and over. And this has been basically like this for a month now. So if he's got something lingering that kind of just re-aggravated during that game, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense why the Lions are favored in this game as well. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I guess we'll find out later this afternoon if he actually ends up on the injury report.
Yeah, that's the big climax that we have. So either KFan with their whispers will be right or wrong in a couple hours when the first injury report hits, because it'll either say limited practice, did not practice, or he won't even be on the damn thing. With that said, yes, Cousins did. He played decent against the Jets. He had some missed throws, but then kind of like the rest of the MO for this team when it mattered, he had the big touchdown to Justin Jefferson. But he was somewhat uncharacteristically hit big and popped right back up, finished the game. And he, outside of the COVID game against the Packers last year, the Sean Mannion pickle juice game and Kellen Mond, a very nasty game against the Packers last year. He was out for COVID, but he has never missed a game due to injury. He missed one game due to virus, and then the Vikings rested him in 2019 for a playoff push. But yeah, we could look at Nick Mullins in theory once we see this injury report. But I'm here to tell you that a 2.5 points spread in favor of the Lions makes a lot more sense if Vegas believes that there's a possibility Nick Mullins is the quarterback, because he's a good backup quarterback, but has never caught on as a long-term starter. He spent most of his time with the 49ers. What would Mr. Nicholas Mullins bring to the table, Josh?
I think he does. He definitely he's one of the better backups in this league. I'd say. I think if you have to go to a backup quarterback, you definitely want that to be Nick Mullins rather than some of the other guys that some of these teams are going to have to throw out. Namely, over in San Francisco, they're throwing out Brock Purdy now. So I mean, I think the Vikings are a little bit set up better in that respect. But Mullins, he's a decent thrower. He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, at least not from what I've seen from him. But he's an accurate passer. He got a little bit of mobility in him as well. So maybe we could see a few more of those Kirk-esque scrambles for first downs that we've seen over the past few weeks. But yeah, I think if you need a game manager, just a guy to go out there, make a few throws, and hopefully win a game, then you can't do much better as in terms of a backup than Nick Mullins. So
When you say mobility, do you mean just a decent pocket presence, or kind of along the lines with Kirk that he's certainly not going to run very much, but he can do it when he needs to?
Yeah, I think it's kind of along the same lines as Kirk. I do think he's got a little bit more quickness in him than old 34-year-old Kirk does at this point, I'd
Okay.
say. But I think he's got a very good presence in that pocket, so he can move up and down, side to side, scramble a little bit if you need him to.
Okay. Yeah. Because when I looked at, I remember when they traded for him after they became overly frustrated with the Mon Mannion sandwich. He doesn't have like many carries rushing wise.
No,
And so when we say mobile, I don't want people to get excited like, oh yeah, all right, he's gonna run
yeah,
the thing 3 or 4 times. No, it's
he's not
just that,
Justin Fields.
yeah, yeah. But we hope, or according to the tape, he's not a total statue, which means that he'd probably have a little bit more of that nimble ability than Cousins, or probably basically like Cousins when Cousins was Mullins' age, where like they're certainly not mobile, but they're not Brady at this point. And even Brady likes to take off and run when the game's on the line, which is kind of cool. All right, so we can't spend too much time on this Cousins thing because it could be completely moot by this evening. But rest assured, if he's on that injury report, that will engulf the Vikings media for the next 4 days. Tell me about the Jets off air, and I'm going to explain it on air. There's nothing more in sports that I despise than having a lead and losing it. So the Vikings are up 20-3, and then their version of Greg the Leg hits the 60-yarder because, of course, that's going to be good. And then, predictably, 3 and out, start the third quarter. You could feel it from 38 miles away that was coming. What did you glean from the Jets game? Was it a positivity, relief, frustration, everything in between? What do we got?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we gotta be happy that they came away with another victory. 10-2, nothing to be upset about, especially considering where this team was at this point in the season last year. So,
Mm-hmm.
I will say that it's mostly positive from this game in terms of my standpoint. Obviously, like the defense to be a little bit better in the second half, but they played one of the most complete halves I've ever seen in that first half of that game. So
Yeah.
I wish we'd see more of that more often, but I mean, you hold the Jets to 3 of 16 on third down, 1 of 6 in the red zone in terms of touchdowns. I mean, you really can't do much better than that. So I tweeted this out during the game too. It almost seemed like at the end of the game, the Vikings were just kind of like, here, you guys can get in the red zone as much as you want because we
Mm-hmm.
know you're not going to score the touchdown. So I doubt that was actually the strategy, but it's a fun little thought process to go through. But yeah, Kirko, he had a few really great throws. That touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson was on the money,
Mm-hmm.
just spectacular. JJ got shut down a little bit by Sauce Gardner, but he came through with his usual 7 catches, a little bit lower than on the yardage than you would like. But yeah, overall, this Jets team is a tough team. They got a great defense. They got strong pass rush. Their O-line's nothing to sniff at either. So, I mean, overall, this is a strong team that's going to be a playoff team, and you're able to come away with a victory. Can't be upset about it.
One thing that's noteworthy about the red zone stat, the 1/6 that you propped up, was although through about the midpoint of the season, a little bit beyond, even though the Vikings didn't allow teams to get into the red zone all that often compared to other teams, when other teams got in the red zone, the Vikings were horrible. It was like automatic that they were going to score. I remember tweeting, I think before the Bills game, maybe before the Washington game, that the Vikings ranked 32nd in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. And now they've flipped the script. They're no longer 32nd. I think they're towards the middle of the league. So for them to rectify that and to seemingly bait the other team to get into the red zone is kind of noteworthy. And yeah, it felt like in the fourth quarter that they were playing to just get the defense on the field to close it out, which is very odd when you have one of the worst yards allowed defenses in the world. My takeaway from the Jets, I explained this on the show on Monday, was at the end of the day, they're a 7-4 team. Now they're 7-5. But I think the problem for myself and a lot of Vikings fans is you're trying to balance the Jets. You're thinking, oh God, we're going to lose to the Jets, but they're not your grandfather's jet or your, I guess, father's Jets. They would have been good if they're your grandfather's Jets. And it's the same thing with the Lions this week. They are 4-1 since the start of November, which is the third best record in the NFL. They've won 4 out of their last 5. Well, the stat speaks for itself there. So we're doing Vikings Lions week thinking, all right, we're playing the Lions. And then if they lose, we're going to be like, yeah, we lost to the Lions. And last year, that type of connotation was fair game because they were, checks notes, the Lions. But now they're pretty decent at 5-7. So we have this back-to-back. I mean, if only we could play the Browns after that, you'd be having these laughing stocks of football, Jets, Lions, not the Browns. But I think we're getting trapped into the same mindset that, oh, we got to beat the Jets. These are the Jets, or we got to beat the Lions. These are the Lions. When 2022 is a little bit different year for them. But let's talk about the Lions, I guess, with the assumption that Cousins will play, because perhaps we would have already heard by now that he was trending not to. I don't know exactly how to feel. And then I checked with some of my sources about the K-Fan thing about Cousins potentially being on the injury report. And their response was K-Fan doesn't know very much. And I'm like, oh, all right. So maybe it was a talker. Who knows? But how do you feel, whether it's Cousins, Mullins, neither one of them? How do you feel about Vikings Lions?
Well, if the Vikings want to go clinch the NFC North this weekend, they're gonna have to go into Detroit and take it. The Lions aren't gonna give it to them. They're gonna put up a fight. You know, Dan Campbell's gonna have that team ready to go. If nothing else, they're gonna be motivated on that sideline. He's gonna give them a fiery pregame speech like he always does, and they're gonna come out ready to go. And another thing, keep an eye on Jameson Williams in this one too, because he finally got onto the NFL field last weekend, played 8 snaps, got 1 target, but didn't catch it. So if they run out an offense where him and Amon-Ra St. Brown are going to be featured wide receivers for Jared Goff to throw to, this is let's just say the Vikings are very lucky that Cam Dantzler is trending towards playing this week too, because if it was a rookie out there, or if they had to throw out Duke Shelley again, I'd feel much less confident about the Vikings' ability to win this game if both of those wide receivers are going to be prominent.
And of course, it all lines up that Jameson Williams. Sometimes I think it's Jameson Williams. And Jameson Williams was gift wrapped to the Lions by the Vikings for Louis Cine and more trade spoils. And it makes perfect sense that he would probably start to get a lion's share of his target load against the Vikings. Now, I don't know if that doesn't mean he's gonna, pull a Randy Moss on them, but Christian Watson has sure blossomed after the Vikings said, "Here you go," to the Packers. So you have some paranoia there. Are these wideouts, because Watson looked like he wasn't going to be that deadly for the first month and a half of the season. Spoke too soon. Here he is, leading the NFL in touchdowns, starting to be a fringe offensive rookie of the year candidate. On the Lions, I don't like this game, and I am predicting the Lions to win by 3, which is against the grain for a lot of the folks that write for our 2 websites. And I know I think the Jets game dampened my appetite on, I think it was because we had a glimpse of what stepping on somebody's neck would feel like. And then, of course, there was nothing of the sort in the second half. And I'm leaning toward the Vikings will beat the Colts at home, beat the Giants at home, and then maybe split with the Packers and Bears, because there's always some bullshit that happens. But I don't like this game because the Lions are hot, and I don't know. I just don't have, and the Kirk thing, I mean, makes me even more feel vindicated. Like, all right. But even with Kirk at the helm, or a healthy Kirk, you have I think you think the Vikings are going to edge them by a few points. Is that correct?
Yeah, if Kirk plays, I think they'll edge him. If Nick Mullins plays, it might be a little bit of a different story. But yeah, I do think one possession game. Vikings are undefeated this year, so you gotta trust them one more time, right?
Yeah, I want to talk about that. We'll end on this topic, and it seems like it's a very cool debate to have, because we haven't had anything of the sort in a very long time for the Vikings. The debate right now, whether it's RG3 saying don't sleep on the Vikings, or Packers pundits saying Vikings are frauds because DVOA says so, there is this disconnect, or this divide or debate that says at 9-0 in 1-score games, Minnesota should be supremely battle tested for January. It sounds like that's what you're starting to, or what you agree with. But then there's also this side that says if you can't beat anybody handily, then you're just destined to regress. You can't keep getting away with this, like the Breaking Bad meme. So where can you have it both ways? Because there's 5 games left of the regular season. If the Vikings are going to be one of those teams that becomes a complete team, they should start it this week, or should have started it last week. Tell me how the world can live with 1-score supremacy versus you don't have it in you to beat a team by more than 1 score.
I mean, I think we I think we're kind of overplaying the fact that the Vikings can't win games by more than one score, because if you look at that first half against the Jets, they
Mhm.
dominated every single bit of that game. And then I think they just kind of took their foot off the gas.
Yeah, they
And
did Zimmer shit.
I, yeah, they
Mhm.
just played prevent defense the whole way down. They, for whatever reason, stopped using the complicated blitz schemes that they were using in that first half. I kind of hope that that's a little bit of a wake up call for them, just because, man, we were up 20-3 and we could have blown that game.
Mhm.
We need to put these guys away in that third quarter, and we can't let that happen again. So I'm kind of hoping that that's going to be the motivation coming into this Lions game, outside of being able to clinch the division as well. So I'm not super concerned about it, but it'd be nice if we won one of these games by 10, 15 points at least at some point, especially looking at the schedule down the stretch.
I ask, because there's so many of these such games. I asked Brian McKinney on the other show, at least every other week, but it seems like it's every week now. Like, man, did the guys in the locker room start to say, like, son of a gun, we can't beat a team by more than 7 points? And McKinney's always like, not really. I mean, a
Yeah.
win's a win. And so as a player, I don't think you really care too much that in the heat of a battle of a regular season, I don't think they care that we can't win by more than one score. So there's that to note. I guess it seems like if the Vikings are going to pull this thing off, make a deep playoff run, or even win the Super Bowl, they're going to do it as one of the grittiest, weirdest teams that nobody believed in. And I guess that kind of follows suit. I tweeted Monday or Tuesday that in the past years, maybe before your time, Josh, is that you in 2017, 2009, 2000, 1998. So all of my NFC championship trips that were bungled. You usually have a good expectation that this team's pretty good and is going to make some noise in the playoffs. Now, right now, I know the team is good, but I don't know that they're going to make noise in the playoffs. So it seems like, doesn't it seem a little poetic that if they keep this up, they're going to go into January with us thinking, I don't know, it's got to be the year then that they win if we have all of these reverse psychology vibes that in 98 nobody could beat them, and then if somebody did, and this
Yeah.
year we're like, God, can we beat any of these teams in the playoffs? Maybe they'll beat them all. What do you think of that voodoo?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I also think the way the NFC is shaping up, at least in week 14 now, 5 weeks away from the end of the regular season, Vikings are shaping up to kind of avoid some of the bigger names in their playoff run. Because you look at it, it's going to probably be one of the Giants, Commanders, or Seahawks in that
Mm-hmm.
wild card game. I feel comfortable beating any of those teams right now. I mean, you beat Washington on the road already, so beating them at home, I think you can do it. Seattle hasn't exactly looked stellar. New York, we'll see what happens on Christmas Eve, but they haven't looked great over the past few weeks either. So I feel comfortable about that. Then you go into the divisional. 49ers might be without Jimmy G. They might be with Jimmy G, but it'll probably be his first game back
Mm-hmm.
since that foot injury. So I don't know. I'd feel relatively comfortable about that as well, even with that stellar defense that they got over there. And then on the other side, you got Dallas probably facing off with Philly in that divisional round, and you get to avoid at least one of those teams. So, I mean, right now, I feel like the road to the NFC Championship game, at least, if it plays out that way, a lot can change over these last few weeks, but you got to be feeling good about that road, especially compared to what's happening on the other side of the bracket where you got Philly, Dallas, and then Tom Brady. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So in your scenario, the Cowboys would have the 5th seed, and then you
right.
think they'd beat the Bucks.
Right.
Okay. So they beat the
Yeah.
Bucks in Tampa. Brady
And
couldn't.
San Fran wins their playoff game on home, and then they go to
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Okay, yeah, and then that would be at that. I can't remember if that would be the timetable that Garoppolo would be back, or if it'd be the
That
prelims
would
show.
so they're saying 7 to 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
7 weeks from now is divisional round, so
Okay,
that would be the first time.
so
Yeah,
you'd get a rusty, just healed Garoppolo back, while the
right.
Cowboys had to deal with the Eagles, and then whoever won that, which probably I think the line. The way the Cowboys are playing right now, the Eagles Cowboys line, no matter a field, will probably be even.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to play the Cowboys right now. That fourth quarter against Indy this week was insane. That
Yeah.
was some of the greatest
It,
football I've seen all season.
it's all fodder to get the Cowboys fans jazzed up before they do something stupid in
Yeah.
the postseason. So, yeah. And then, yeah, you'd get the 49ers at home. Won't be fun, but it's better than going there. That's why I will maintain, even if I'm right or wrong, I guess, against the Lions, the Vikings got to stay 2 games ahead of the 49ers because you do not want to go there. We've already seen them.
I was looking at some of those 49ers numbers. Their splits between the home and road.
Mhm.
It's kind of crazy how it shapes up because their defense on third downs, I think at home, they're like top 5 in the league. And then
Mhm.
on the road, they're one of the worst. Same with red zone percentage. Like they're 2-3 on the road this year with losses to Chicago, Atlanta, and Denver.
Yeah. Oh my
So I
God.
mean,
That's
so
horrible.
that's that's a team that it's pretty different compared from home compared to on the road. So if you get them on the road, they have a lot of star talent, but they have not been consistent on the road games at all.
Yeah, that is a abysmal, embarrassing road loss docket between the Falcons, Broncos, and Bears.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
week 1 against the Bears was that monsoon game
yeah,
where it was just 5 inches of rain or whatever, and anybody could have come out of that game with just by pure luck. But either way, like 3 of those losses in a row is just not good.
yeah. On the scenario that you had, that's more likely now than ever because of the Garoppolo injury and the Cowboys being so fancy, demolishing all these teams. Is indeed, if that was the case, if the Vikings beat the Seahawks round 1, then they host the 49ers because the 49ers will have taken care of business against the Commanders or something like that. That would mean in your scenario that the Cowboys would go to the Eagles, and it would be very
Right.
reasonable that the Cowboys could beat the Eagles. And if they did, the NFC Championship would be at home, and you'd have a
At
revenge
home.
game from getting your face kicked in 40-3 against the Cowboys. So it's all that's still about 6-7 weeks in front of us, 6, 7, 8 weeks in front of us. However, that would be how the Cosmos would align, and I would feel good about that NFC Championship because they got their asses kicked and they said
Yep.
we know how to avoid this. And it would be, I would, again, I talked about poetic nature before. It would feel like, all right, we got that out of our system for good reason in week 11. Now we can return the favor. One final note, not related to the Vikings at all, but when you talked about the Broncos and me laughing at them beating the Niners once upon a time, I accidentally discovered that with all of these Broncos struggles and woes, they're also doing it with one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. Their strength of
Yep.
schedule
It's
through 13 weeks is like, I think it was 4th or 5th easiest.
Yeah, it's disgusting. That offense is just they cannot put up 20 points in a single game. It's incredible.
I,
It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen.
yeah, you were on our NFL Trend Zone show about 3 weeks ago, and the consummate Broncos fan on that show, he spent
Oh, Jason.
years bitching about Brock Osweiler, Joe Flacco, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, thinking, and now he wants them back.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably want one of those guys back right now,
Yeah,
especially with what you could pay him.
yeah. Well, yeah. That the contract aside, it's like on the field, he used to bemoan 3-and-outs and this conservative offensive play with all 4 of those quarterbacks after Manning's exodus. And now he looks back and he considers that prolific because of how
Yeah, no,
poor.
it's crazy.
Oh man. All right, I got
We're gonna have to make this a weekly segment at this point, just talking the last 5 minutes about the Broncos
oh,
because
I
it's so much
know.
fun.
It is, and if there's no end in sight, they're going to have to fire. I think they're ultimately going to fire Hackett, and then he'll be scapegoated for the offseason because you can't do anything else with Russell Wilson's contract. Jason on that show even floated maybe Russell Wilson will have a come to Jesus epiphany, and he'll go into George Payton's office and say, tear up this contract and let's be fair about this.
Yeah.
Let's start over. And that's how desperate the realms of thought are for what can be done there. All right. My dirty little secret is I'm picking the Lions 30-27. What's your prediction?
I've got right now, if Kirk Cousins plays, I've got Vikings 31-28. I do think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. Neither one of these defenses have been super impressive in recent weeks. So I think there'll be a lot of points in this one, but Vikings squeak out another one.
And then in theory, because it's unlikely that we'll talk to you on video again, if Mullins is announced as a starter on Saturday or something, then what?
I'm going to go for that one. I'd probably go Lions. I'll say 27-24. A little bit
Okay.
less scoring, but yeah, I think the Lions would pull that one out.
All right, fair enough. All right, sir, we'll be back next Wednesday and we'll get ready for Colts week. Who knows what they'll look like at that time? And that game will take place on a Saturday at noon. Any closing arguments, sir?
Welcome back, Cam Dantzler.
Oh, yeah, that is a dazzling closing argument. All right, man. We'll talk to you next
Yeah.
week.
See ya.
Later.